Thank you everyone for joining. This is the NeuroHub introduction webinar, and we'll be doing this in two parts. I will give you some motivation and sort of like the vision of the project, and Bryan, Caron will be doing a more detailed and practical review of where we're at the moment. So I must say it's a very exciting time for NeuroHub. It's been a while that we've been working on this, and it's really nice to see this coming together and being launched very soon. So accompanying to this webinar, there will be some training workshops that really encourage people to register to, and I think Bryan, you will be saying a bit more on this as well. I would also want to take the time to thank the development team, who has done a tremendous job, like especially in the this last 6 months have been really hectic and very busy for the development team. And I hope you will enjoy both the webinar and the platform itself when you try it. So my name is JB Poline. I work at DMNI. I'm an associate professor, and Bryan Caron is the director of the development of NeuroHub. So what are the challenges and motivation for the platform and the vision of it, and what kind of approach we took? And then I will cover those two topics, and Bryan will talk about the feature, the functionalities, what we expect for in the near future, and the learning opportunities and training, as I said. So what are the motivation? And I really want to say that, my personal motivation, at least, was to sort of work on the reproducibility aspect of neuroscience. And for this, having some fair data, some findable, accessible, interpretable, reusable data, something that also encompasses sensitive data, something that also gives you the opportunity to work with machine learning and artificial intelligence aspects. All those things were, high in the motivation. But the reproducibility was really super important to me. We know that the small n's and I'll talk about the vibration effect aspect. I think that those things are really important, and this platform is an answer to those problems. I also wanted to mention that in the future, we really need to make sure that we have a good provenance platform, so that you know exactly what you've done on what data, but also making sure that you can collaborate more easily with your colleagues. And that also is high on the motivation part of NeuroHub. Interoperate with other infrastructure. We are not alone in the world. There are many good tools around, and what we want to do is leverage those tools and make sure that we can work with those tools in a syncretic, in a good collaborative way. And the last point, which I will emphasize a bit at the end of this part of the webinar, is incentivizing dataset and pipeline publishing. And the reason why I think it is important is that partly the structure of publishing in neuroscience and in science in general is not sort of incentivizing you to work on like making sure that the pipelines and the data sets are really good research objects that can be reused by others and can be actually published for themselves. And I'll emphasize that direction, that vision for the future. I said that reproducibility was one of the things that really motivated me to embark in those neuroinformatics projects. One of the key things is that the large number of sample is really required. And if you need some large number of sample, you absolutely need the good infrastructure to do the computation and to host those large samples. So I won't go into the sort of like the history of the reproducibility problems that we have found in neuroscience. It's not clear in every field that this is like a problem, but in general, I think the neuroscience community has come along and said, okay, we need to work on that reproducibility aspect. And the one little thing I wanted to mention is the vibration effect. And the more and more people realize that when they're using one tool or another, they don't always find the same results. And that is, it's fine in some ways, like tools are designed for a specific question. But in many cases, the robustness and the generalizability of your result with respect to different tools is important. In this little figure, I'm showing like the correlation, the poor correlation between the assessment of cortical thickness between the various tools. This platform should allow you to actually say, hey, I don't want to only publish with one tool and one pipeline. I also want to make sure that my results hold when I change the pipeline, when I vary the tool that I'm using for, let's say, assessing the gray matter surface or something like that. So for this, you absolutely need a large number of computation, and that's also what NeuroHub can provide you with. In terms of the ends, one of the stellar and key deliverable of NeuroHub, and I'm sure Bryan will go a bit more on that as well, is the UK Biobank. It's a fantastic project which gives you access to more than 200 terabytes of imaging, genetic, clinical data, behavioral data, and so on a large prospective cohort of in terms of imaging. Soon we'll have like 100,000 participants, but already have more than 500,000 participants for the genetic and other data set. This is accessible to the whole McGill research community now. It's a wide scope application, so it's not like specifically for one research question. It's really a wide scope research question application, and that's really I should commend Alan Evans for doing this, because that's really like a major sort of a major result for NeuroHub and a major tool and for the whole McGill community. You can access those data directly on Compute Canada. You can access them through the NeuroHub portal for low-risk instance, and Bryan will go through that as well, I'm sure. What is important as well is that all the computations that we are doing on those datasets will be available and are available through the NeuroHub portal. And that is saving a lot of the computational time that people don't have to redo all those computations. And when we talk about like 100,000 participants or more, it's absolutely critical that we don't waste CPU and GPU times for redoing things that have been already done. So the scope of NeuroHub is quite vast. It really goes across the spectrum, from the very generic tool where you can host data and just sort of like process them with your scripts, to the very specific tools of hosting some like a low-risk database with all the functionalities of querying and creating systems. So this NeuroHub is really going through the whole spectrum of having like a very simple Dropbox-like, if you want, tool, to a very complex and the more complex and the more information you put in data or in pipelines, obviously the more useful they can be, but the less scalable they are in some sense, because you need to put the human work for that. So NeuroHub is really like an integrative platform. It's based on the current product that are there: CBrain, Loris, Jupyter Hub, some of the Canadian Open Neuroscience platform tools. NeuroHub is not a simple one thing. It's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem creating the bridges between many things that hopefully gives some a large capacity for a large number of people. Conceptually, it integrates 4 spaces: the project portal space, if you want a dashboard of what you're doing and what is happening in your world; the data sets, some interactive computing environment, and some more like a processing factory aspect where you have to launch for a large number of computation on a large amount of data. So let's go with those spaces briefly. If you, first of all, if you're logging on NeuroHub, you can log in using the standards of the community. This is, for instance, ORCID for identifying a researcher and having your dashboard over there. Then access large data sets, the QPN, the Biobank, of course. The UK Biobank is the thing that I've talked about, and one of the key element of NeuroHub. And in the future, all the CONP data sets will be there as well. It's also give you flexibility again in terms of storage and what kind of a system do you want to use to host your data. Those data can be on your hub. They can be in the future. They can be on Loris and linked to NeuroHub. They can be on other places, and they will be linked to NeuroHub as well, where you can host your data in some place and then launch some processing pipelines on those data. The processing pipelines are implemented in CBrain. They're using standards of the community to describe those pipelines as well. So the boutique standard, for instance, and then through container technology, they can be launched on Compute Canada using the CBrain application. We also added an interactive exploratory aspect to those computation, and that's implemented through the Jupyter Hub. And many of you probably have used already Jupyter Hub. It's a really great tool to explore interactively data before you actually want to launch on a very large number of participants or samples. And then in the future, I think we all want to make sure that those research objects, those pipelines that you're working on, those data sets that you're documenting, they can be published in good venues. And I think that's really an anticipation for making sure that the work that you're doing on those things is recognized by your scientific community. So this is a very brief overview of the NeuroHub platform. I just want to say a quick word on the future of, again, making sure that those research objects will be publishable and in platforms. And we're working on two platforms, one that is dedicated to Jupyter notebooks, and that will be the NeuroLibrary platform, and one that is more like a neuroscience general platform for traditional publishing that is linked to other research objects than more than just PDFs, and that's the Aperture platform with the in collaboration with the Organization for the Human Brain Mapping. I think I'm done with my quick introduction. I would like to thank again Bryan and the team for making that happening, and give him the floor now for a more detailed aspect of NeuroHub. And I will stop sharing my screen. And I think we'll take questions and feedback at the end, if that's okay.
Excellent. Good. Thank you, JP. So thanks for that introduction. I'm going to take a small step to kind of identify and explain, hopefully, some of the conceptual issues that were also beyond, the very clear challenges that JB outlined that we're trying to tackle with the ecosystem, what NeuroHub as it is. So if I just start by looking, okay, what in a typical workday, workflow of someone doing their research activities, or some major key themes that they try and work through. They're trying to go through data collection. They're going to actually want to process that data, whether it's some large form of processing using standard tools, and then they're going to do some analysis where they're going to say do some statistical fitting and so on. And then they're going to go through that and then say, well, I want to share that with my colleagues. I want to get some feedback. I want to share it, ultimately in the end with my collaborators, my peers. And then they're going to go through the cycle again. There's going to be a period of, again, more data collection, more processing, analysis, and so on. And the intention is with NeuroHub and a variety of tools, but particularly NeuroHub, is to try and simplify that workflow. So if I look at each phase, and I'll highlight just maybe 3 of the phases here, just to show you what there is complexity right now without looking at what NeuroHub is doing. If one looks at the day-to-day work from a processing point of view, there is lots of complexity and barriers to overcome to actually be productive in one's work. So from a data processing point of view, if we focus on that stage, for example, there's data collection, say from your instrument, whether it's from your scanner and so on. You have that primary data, but you want to process it. And it's a large volume of data. So typically what people have done is they say, okay, well, I'm going to run this across multiple systems. That can be on their local lab system. They could be running it also on Compute Canada or other HPC resources. And all those types of systems require access and for execution through using the command line. So each system could also be different. They have different concepts of storage, different concepts of queues, how they actually moderate the workflow on those systems. And you have to also make sure your tool is compiled and built on each of those individual systems, which, depending on each environment, has its own peculiarities, its own differences, and its own models. So you have to then install that software. And then you run that, and you have to then collect your data, and then you want to be able to share it. So the complexity is right there within the processing phase. Similarly with the analysis phase, if we look at that next one, we have then, yes, the data is resident on n different systems, but you're going to want to do your interactive or more batch-oriented data analysis on those other systems. And those typically have been command line driven, or sometimes GUIs, depending upon what tool set you're using. And again, it's diverse because you're working on a variety of systems, and whether it's in the lab or again on HPC resources. So then you have to customize and deal with the complexity that each of those bring into play into your day-to-day world. And finally, with regard to the sharing, okay, now you've done your processing, you've done some analysis across those diverse sets of platforms, and you say, well, I want to share it with people now. Well, if you're running on Compute Canada, then you want to share it. You have a certain way of defining the groups and the membership and who should actually be able to see it, what data you want to be visible to, say, people in your team versus people outside. Again, that can vary between every single system that you're working on, whether it's the HPC side, if you're doing things in the cloud or doing things in your lab. So there's different layers, and you have to multiply this by n depending on the n number of systems that you're working with. So what we try and do and have been doing, and we've achieved with NeuroHub, is that we actually have leveraging core developments around CBrain and Loris, and we've actually want to simplify this experience for the users. And by doing this, we've actually developed a specific user interface, a graphical user interface to abstract away a lot of the complexity. We're leveraging the power of an API that is resident in behind within CBrain to do more complex tasks, but also to simplify that experience. We also have other technologies that built around Loris using the data query tool to really simplify that process of going from your data processing phase into your analysis phase. And we do that by a number of ways that are particularly leveraging the communications capabilities between the two elements, Loris and CBrain. And we've also made very stronger use of the HPC systems by storing large volumes of files using something called SquashFS. That's something that we put together, not the SquashFS part, of course, but just leveraging that to help facilitate large data volume projects, for example, such as the UK Biobank, which is mentioned here and JB's talked about already. So in terms of that particular development, you say, well, what do we do now in terms of NeuroHub? What NeuroHub lets us do is actually we simplify and we compress it down essentially into a single pane of glass view. So that processing, which again, as I showed previously in the workflow, had different settings and different environments that one had to deal with. We simplified it again, as I said, it's a single pane of glass to deal with the data, to deal with your tool selection, to deal with the job launching, and that's across multiple heterogeneous systems. From a data analysis point of view, we also simplify that. Again, be able to use the single pane of glass GUI for driving your batch analysis that you would execute. Again, that'd be leveraging the orchestration from CBrain on the back end, and also being able to use standard tools like JupyterHub, which is operated on instances like on Compute Canada and elsewhere, to leverage the API so that you can then access that data which is resident. And that data is, again, viewed in an abstracted way, particularly when we look into sharing into publishing. So that, again, we do, instead of having n different models by which people have to define their groups, the sharing groups and so on, we provide a single web-based UI for people to actually define those settings that are consistent across all those platforms so that people don't have to worry about the peculiarities or the individualities of the individual systems. So this makes then life a lot easier from the day-to-day point of view for carrying out this workflow. So if you look at the phases we've gone through, particularly to get where we are today with the release of NeuroHub that we're presenting at. So we did an initial alpha release in May of this year, where we made the features available to users, an individual group of 20 or so users who gave us some initial feedback. We addressed issues specific to that alpha testing phase, and released in early September a beta release where we address, as I said, those features, and then the scope of visibility and exposure to users and getting their feedback has grown to about 50 users now, and who've gone through and tested at least 90 or so times. That feedback is continuing to roll in. Now we're at a phase where we address the issues that have been there, particularly things in the areas of engagement, outreach, and training are very key. If we want to obviously demonstrate the use of the platform, the features and capabilities, we want to get it into people's hands so they can actually do some exercises. So that'll be part of the program, obviously, what we're doing today in this first information session, but some of the trainings that I'll talk about in a second. But we're looking at our first community release in November, so obviously later coming up very shortly. And this is because it's an ecosystem of software. It's going to go through a continuous software evolution. So we're going to obviously iterate and make sure that we're going to add more features, address issues that come up, and continue to evolve the platform to make sure it meets the needs of the community. So in terms of the capabilities of the platform as it is now, and then what people will get their hands-on experience with coming up, what I'll talk about in a minute. So as I mentioned, we have a web-based UI, so a web-based interface where people would specifically log in, and they're able to then do their main activities corresponding to data management, setting who they want their collaborators to be within their space. Within that, they're also able to access larger, important data sets, such as the UK Biobank that were mentioned, and there's others, that we can then economize, particularly both in terms of the presence and maintenance of that data and how it's made available to researchers, but at the same time also economizing on the processing. So we avoid a lot of duplication of resource consumption. We want to, particularly in those cases, make sure we share the outcomes so that people can then take advantage of that work that's been done. As was mentioned by GB already, we have the interactive computing element within the Jupyter instance that integrates to the API. And again, we leverage the CBrain orchestration system for large-scale processing. So that way we can make use of platforms such as Compute Canada, which is our main, obviously, platform that people can tie into for all their processing. So the UI is just a quick snapshot and demonstration of what the UI looks like. Again, people would log in, they have a dashboard where they can actually manage their collaborations, manage their data, whether they're looking at the different projects that they're working part of, the storage devices that they want to be able to connect. There's also a messaging interface whereby you can actually communicate with other members and add members within your group and communicate with them, as well as links to our online set of documentation. From the data management portal, which I talked about, and I clicked a little bit about the projects, the ability is there really to define a wide variety of different data groups, organizations. So we have project data, and then which you can define specific access. So you can see in this example here, we have, for those members who are part of the UK Biobank team, they can actually then access the data specific to that, but they can also then access other different projects that are within their sphere. So when users and groups are able to upload and share their data, and that can be not only just data files, but their project notes, documents, scripts, and notebooks as well. So all that is then visible and shareable within their community. And then tied into that is particularly then, okay, fine, I can share these objects, if you will, but then you can actually use them and connect them to the rest of the ecosystem for data exploration through notebooks or large-scale processing through the CBrain side on the back end. And that data, as was mentioned by GB, could be resident within NeuroHub. We have storage that's specific for hosting data that's within that platform, but we also have flexibility through a variety of what are called data providers that let that data be resident in a number of locations. So it's really a way of federating that data across a variety of systems, whether it's data within NeuroHub itself, data that's resident on allocations that people may have within Compute Canada, their individual lab servers, or even if they operate and have acquired, for example, more commercially oriented cloud service providers such as Amazon, for example. So just to give an example, and I know this is one particular phase I'm going to go through rather quickly here, but people will get a very good introduction and hands-on experience as part of the training coming up. If you look at a normal life cycle, you say, well, people say, I have, I've started my group, I want to invite users. I can then invite those users to join the group. It's all done through the messaging system. People can be added. But then the next phase is, well, I'm going to upload my files. So the cycle is going anti-clockwise here. People can upload their files. They can select them then for what they want to say, I want to run a process on them. We have specific tools and pipelines that are configured and containerized within the system that let people then select what they want to run. So as an example that was done in documentation, there's some anatomical processing, then people can select the specific tools, and then the output can be pushed back then automatically once it's completed into the sharing space where people can then actually see the output, not just the people who submitted it, but also the people who then are part of that collaborative group. So that entire workflow is supported and facilitated within CBrain and the NeuroHub components so that we can actually then leverage, as I said, the capabilities there to remove the complexity of doing things by the command line, making sure we're dealing with in standard ways, standard tools, and a very easy to use interface. Moving and talking about the interactive computing part, as I said and mentioned by GB, we have the JupyterHub notebooks. So again, from the notebook point of view, it uses the API that's in the back end for leveraging that data access. And we already have a number of examples that are in our GitHub site specific to NeuroHub that will give some examples on how to do some access to data and process data on there. And this will be the topic of one of our training sessions upcoming. So then leveraging that, people can do their processing, whether it's using Python, using R, or Julia as well, but particularly R and Python, that allows them to use that capabilities within NeuroHub to access their data, to do their interactive data exploration. So those are, I would say, from a processing point of view. And I just want to take a few minutes. I know JB talked a bit about the UK Biobank already, so I won't duplicate some of this information here, other than say it is a large data set and it has a commonwealth of information that's there and valuable to the community. And it really exemplifies a good demonstration of the use case that we have within NeuroHub, and we support that data access across a number of platforms and using tools that let people work with it both directly, say within JupyterHub if they want, and also specific features that people will then want to do for further analysis in the large-scale batch processing. For example, the data query tool that's there lets people create file lists, and that's something that's unique specifically within a feature within NeuroHub, that within those file lists that people can then use to do some further analysis on data samples that are there. So as was mentioned already, the data sets, it's not just the UK Biobank, we also have directly connected into the NeuroHub platform, the access to the CMP data sets, which is a growing list of data sets that we're providing access to. At present, this includes things like visual working memory, the Prevent AD, and we're currently working on other ones in the OpenPain and the OpenABCD side of things. And anything else pretty much that is available within Loris and the CMP side will be available in the NeuroHub space. And this is just an example, as I said, specifically of how the UK Biobank, particularly in the data query tool, simplifies it. Again, it's GUI driven. What's behind the scene, what you see here, while it is GUI driven, we have a great set of tools in behind that can also provide a lot of automation behind. So the key thing particularly is, as I was going to mention from the UK Biobank side, is making that data query tool selection. We can then export the data to NeuroHub and then provide other execution upon those data samples. So that is, it's a good example of how we're using the ecosystem together. So that's an overview of very quickly in terms of what features and functionalities are presently there. Certainly, as I mentioned, the platform has continued to evolve and looking at other new features to add and also to make the current ones more robust. That includes looking to update the user interface. We have a rack-based user interface that's well along its way that we're going to be applying for looking to deploy as part of the platform. From a data management point of view, we're going to continue adding to the CMP data sets that are visible and accessible within the platform. We're updating, this is more of a technical point just with regard to how we deal with various data sets that are shared and also their metadata, but we're going to update the integration with DataLab for greater flexibility and also add capabilities in there that were already present in other platforms that we tie into, but make it integrated part of NeuroHub is for that data set documentation capture, the metadata, so people can then have a better description of their data, and that's all GUI driven as well. And also for opportunities for greater integration with other platforms. And I think if some people might have, for example, participated in the Open Access Week sessions that McGill Libraries ran, there were presentations there about Dataverse and the OSF side of things. So we'll have linkages that will allow integration and sharing of data between those platforms. And finally, continuing forward, In terms of the computational tools in regard to publishing as well, we want to improve, and we're going to keep working on improving the JupyterHub notebook experience. And a future step is also integration, as was pointed out already by JB, in terms of integration with NeuroLibrary. So in terms of the support point of view, all the main information from a documentation point of view is on our documentation pages, which are reside in GitHub. I'll have some key links at the end that people can share, but they're visible not only in GitHub, but it's also present on every link that or every dashboard entry point. So right across the top of the dashboard is a link perpetually there to get people easy access to the documentation, where we cover a wide range of things, covering from just getting started all the way through to specific examples. I encourage people to take a look. One of the things that we particularly want, beyond talk to talk, we want people to walk the walk, and right, that specifically means getting hands-on access to the different components and to data and trying things out. So for that, we've created 2 workshops upcoming. The first one being the fundamentals of NeuroHub, and the second one being more advanced topics. The first one will be 17th, so that's next Tuesday, where we're going to really go through into more detail and hands-on experiential learning to get people familiar with the NeuroHub UI and its dashboard, and get also working with using the data input-output mechanisms that are there, the sharing, as well as getting familiar with how to do that task launching components that we described at a high level so far. So that means getting used to working with the data, selecting your applications, monitoring the task through the execution phase, and then accessing the results, and then be able to share that back with collaborators. So that's is what we call the fundamentals. So that does not have any real I would say prerequisites, but it's very basic, but it's the core fundamental pieces we want people to take away from knowing about NeuroHub. And then the second one will be more advanced topics. That'll be a couple weeks later, where we're going to go into concepts specifically that are behind the Loris data query tool and how that interacts with NeuroHub, using the API specifically within CBrain, so that people can then do things within NeuroHub, and particularly the JupyterHub notebooks experience. So that'll be particularly the focus of the second workshop coming up 2 weeks later. The first one has been published already, and the second one's just going to be advertised very, very shortly. I encourage people to follow, and I'll provide a link at the end to our main page, but we have a specific page covering the events that are upcoming for people to look at. And then from there, people can register in Eventbrite specifically for either of these workshops. Just as a note, I think as of yesterday, we've maxed out at our 25 number of registrants for the first workshop number 1. There's a wait list specifically for that. But because of obviously the high demand, this would not be a one-off delivery of this workshop. We would be looking to, of course, deliver that upcoming again, so that people can get experience with those particular capabilities. So beyond the training, how do we interact with everyone? Clearly, we want to be able to support people in their use of the platform and the different elements of the ecosystem. So we've created a single real point of entry specific to that, and that's the fundamental base for that would be by email. So anytime there's a question about how to use the platform and so on, about getting access to the data, or if there's any queries about something not working, we ask people to send us a support request at our email address that's listed here. All those emails are automatically creating a ticket in our issue tracking system, and we triage those for user support. So then we can then assign it to the person best suited to help the request coming through. So in that whirlwind, just to conclude, and we'll go to any questions or inquiries that people may have. So I hope what you've been able to see today, both from what the challenges and outlined in terms of what we're in front of the community in terms of their objectives and what things they have to work with, I hope we've demonstrated the integrative platform that we bring together in NeuroHub is really providing key functionalities for scientific discovery. It facilitates and simplifies the experience by providing a web-based portal interface. We provide simplified capabilities in terms of data management and collaboration, and we've also provide access to large data sets that are of wide interest and importance to the group, to the community, because that way we're able to then economize resources, which, as we know, are not infinite when it comes to computing. So, and from that, we're also able to provide interactive computing and large scale processing. So we try and do that again through a simplified interface. I think that is not only a simplified interface for the majority of people, but at the same time has a powerful interface in mind. So it has capabilities for supporting very complex environments as well. I encourage people to take a look at our main website, the neurohub.ca, that's posted here. The main portal for entry when people have accounts or even how to get an account is listed there as well. And again, for any inquiries or support, we have a singular email address that we're happy to receive those queries, whether it's technical or basic ones. About getting started, we're happy to receive those. My last point is just to point out the people behind the whole project, and JB nicely indicated that this is certainly a large effort that's gone through with a lot of intense effort from a number of people. So all the people here in this development team are listed, and I'd like to thank them as well for all their hard work that's been ongoing and is going to be continuing. So I'm very proud of what's been developed by the group and what we've been able to put forward. And I look forward to how we can continue to evolve the platform so that we can actually better suit people's needs. Thank you. That's all it from my portion.
Thank you very much, Bryan. That was superb. I think we should see if there are questions. I think the best way, if you can, is just to put your question in on the chat. I see already one question. Will the recording be available? I think yes. The answer must be yes. We probably will put that on the NeuroHub portal website itself. Yes, so definitely.
Yeah, I didn't see that one in the public chat, but maybe I don't know if that was a private message sent. But yes, as soon as the link is available, we will publish it on the website for people to review and share.
If you have any questions, remarks, discussion points, we have a few minutes. I think we should end around 45. So we have a few minutes, and be very welcome any of your feedback. And again, as Bryan said, this is this is an evolving ecosystem. We're going to iron and tweak it such that it's actually best for your needs. So anything that you want, wish, or would like to have, this is also a good time to sort of point us to those things. Any first question for myself, Bryan? What is the procedure for transferring, sharing data on NeuroHub for those projects that are not open yet and require registered access, such as CCNA? So I think, I mean, I'll let Bryan speak more on that, but the prototypical example is the UK Biobank. It's definitely not an fully open access data set. It is hosted by on the Compute Canada disk, so you have to be added to the Compute Canada group that has access to the disk, and also on the LORIS database. So that kind of like procedure could be repeated for CCNA for sure. I think that hopefully will be.
The tools are already available. So, for example, in the process, if you create a project within NeuroHub, already it's not something that we are able to define the dataset manager, and you can define as the project owner the license, in terms of any specific constraints or issues with Biden's rules that you would want to have a specific group, and then you would be the moderator of that. It would not have to come through us. You would be able to then accept requests or moderate requests that come in. So that, say, for example, in the CCNA case, for example, that could be restricted specifically to the members of who would, of course, they would sign up through your platform, through the platform if they want to access through the user interface. Or as in the case that, for example, that JB said, there are other groups that we would define and configure, say, on Compute Canada platform if you wanted to have access to data there. But through the NeuroHub interface, the delegation of defining who can have access or not would be assigned specifically to the data owner or the project owner in this case. So it's very easy to control, and that way it's very moderated, and there's no leakage of data in that regard.
And the great addition and value of putting those things on your hub is really to make sure that you can have access to the powerful Compute Canada HPCs. I think that's really what NeuroHub is really advancing and making sure that you can process on a very large system your computations. For the compute resources on the provided by the platform, do users have to use their own allocation, or is there an umbrella allocation for the platform? And the answer is I think both, but I will let Bryan, because we have discussed an allocation typically for NeuroHub, but this is actually going to be through the C-brand allocation. So yes, there will be an umbrella allocation, but I think you will be also able to use your own allocation. Bryan, do you want to elaborate?
So with regard to the compute allocation, so for example, if you're launching tasks, so there is an umbrella allocation specific that covers the NeuroHub use case for launching processing. So that is covered under the umbrella. That being said, that umbrella allocation, at least the system facilitates using of multiple allocations for our main processing pieces. So yes, it can leverage both the central allocation, but when it comes to things at the moment, for things like say you're doing an interactive JupyterHub instance, that would be based upon your own allocation for those particular activities, because it would be logging in directly with your particular credential there on Compute Canada's platform, and therefore there it would be counted against your Compute Canada allocation for that interactive activity.
There's a long question on the not exactly the same return that you can get on the Loris data query tool versus the AMS system. So for that, I think Fabrizio, if you could put that question specifically, because that's I think it will require a bit more digging to answer that question. So I would recommend that you put that question in the support, and we'll be addressing it in full detail.
And actually that ticket, thank you for I know that ticket is in our super queue, and it's been assigned to one of our specialists who may not have gotten back to you just yet. But there are indications. So what's been the Loris DQT at the moment specifically is with regard to COVID. So I think there is a differentiation in terms of the number. So it's not the full UK Biobank that's available through the DQT. It's the COVID specific data there. But again, we'll have someone reply back to that to get to that specific question.
And the next question is, can we use the platform to create a database of our own file systems or queryable by custom metadata? We don't have that specifically. There's obviously the Loris database if you wanted to have an instance of that, but we don't have like a local tool to create a local database. Maybe that's something that we can think of for like basically not sharing, but for your own querying system. So I don't think we have that yet. There are tools that exist and that could be installed. So we may be looking into that. I think we have run out of time. If it's the 45 minutes allocation, I would like to thank everyone again. It's really an exciting time for the project, and it's going to move forward with not only the development team but the whole community. So we're really looking forward to the interaction. Please sign up for the training. I know that the first training is already booked. Fully booked, but there will be others. So like watch the mailing list and the announcements. There will be more training for everyone, and hopefully again we're going to refine that platform and from your feedback and with your feedback.
So I encourage you. So even if it does, as JB said, it's full, put your name on the wait list. That way we're going to query people. Sometimes there are some, I would say, spots that open up at the last moment, when I say that maybe even early the day before. So we'll try and make sure that we maximize the attendance so that people can get that experience and hands-on trials with the particular elements. And then we'll look to obviously operate again. But so certainly keep, just because if we mention it's full now, please add it to the wait list, and then we'll go through and make sure we'll plan accordingly for other sessions so that we can get those to you as soon as possible.
And any feedback is good to give us. Good as well, and not only if you have problems.
But in the end, all feedback is helpful.
Thank you very much, everyone, and hopefully to the next time.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And as we said, we'll have this recording available for any of your colleagues, for example, who weren't able to join today, or if you want to come back and refer to anything.
Bye, everyone.
All right, thank you.